6 days of sleep deprivation. My hands were constantly shaking from an automatic stress response and adrenaline. Even if I made it home in the late hours of the night, my phone never stopped. It vibrated and buzzed continuously. How could I be so privileged to sleep while others were so desperate for help? They were calling me, and they were calling us as their lifeline. For these 6 days, I had no idea who was picking my children up from school or dropping them off, or even how they had clean school clothes for the next day. The days felt long, heightened, and frantic, trying to achieve as much as we could. I was so deep in group texts and logistics, making sure everything got to where it desperately needed to be. Then, it all temporarily paused when I received a group text. It was a video message to our core group, and it was a warning which said, "We've been informed by the police and Essential Energy that there is high voltage lines in the water coming out of the sugar mill at Broadwater. They have told us not to go into the main river for obvious safety reasons. It's your call if you want to go in and risk yourself." I frantically called my husband and said, "Don't you dare get in that water." To which he replied, "It's too late." They were already in the water on their jet skis and were about to head up the river. It was 1 year's worth of rainfall in 1 week, 40 jet skis and boats, 160 volunteer drivers, 400 warehouse volunteers, 2,500 meals cooked by 25 chefs in 5 makeshift kitchens, over 12,000 litres of fuel and tens of thousands of bottles of water, $130,000 of cash in donations. These are just some of the numbers that I can share with you today. But let me go back and start at the beginning. I have lived in Currumbin my whole life. I'm a 4th generation Currumbin local. And today I am here to share the story of this community's emergency response in the Eastern Australian floods. Now, I feel like it's important to note that this is not just my story, but this is the story of hundreds of incredible everyday people who collectively did extraordinary things during a natural disaster. Community is around and we all live within one, but perhaps I and a lot of others didn't truly appreciate or understand the unity that it can have when you really choose to come together. In a world where everyone at the time had never felt more divided at the tail end of the pandemic in March 2022. The events that transpired made us all see the true power and effect of community pull and connection. These were the worst floods ever recorded for a lot of the towns that were affected throughout the Northern Rivers and beyond. Towns like Lismore, floodwaters were 2 metres higher than where any flood had risen to before. People were stranded on their roofs and inside their homes and just waiting on someone to help. Back here in Currumbin, some mates were texting and decided to take out their jet skis to see if they could lend a hand. At dawn, they met at the boat ramp and launched into the Tweed River system. A few of us mums dropped our kids at school and then met them at the boat ramp with some basic meals and food supplies. Now, some of the good-hearted lads thought we had brought too much, but we all quite quickly realised that we needed much more. As word spread, more friends and their extended friendship circles joined in with their boats and jet skis, dropping off supplies. In fact, this was the start of a 6-day first responder type-scaled event. Through the power of social media and the community just showing up, supplies were dropped, sorted, and loaded onto one of the 40 vessels. Now, who were these people? They were friends and friends of friends via word of mouth, willing to jump in and do whatever was needed. risking their own safety, checking in on people and animals, delivering critical medicines and food, doing welfare checks and undertaking evacuations. One of these guys had lost his own possessions. His family home was underwater, yet he was out there on his boat, rescuing others and delivering our supplies. Another friend, Luke, met a paramedic at the Murwillumbah drop-off point. The paramedic asked for help to get blood bags from the Tweed Hospital for his patients. He jumped on Luke's jet ski and down they went to Tweed. They filled his backpack with blood and returned to Murwillumbah within 50 minutes. The paramedic could not believe it. He had been waiting on SES to deliver for over 40 hours. The crew of mates also evacuated a young woman in labour, a mum with a newborn, a lady with epilepsy, and even this pony. These are just a few of the things that happened on the Tweed on those first 2 days. We realised we couldn't just stay in a park at the boat ramp, so we offered up our warehouse space. These warehouses right here where we are all sitting tonight. And an emergency makeshift drop-off centre began. When we rolled up our warehouse doors at 6 a.m. that very first morning, we had a handful of people ready to volunteer for the day. By the end of day 6, we had over 300 warehouse volunteers. This huge drop-off centre was created and everyone got to work. Collecting, sorting, packing and repeat. Nobody stopped. People came to donate items and said they were so taken aback that they just could not leave us. We had so many local businesses dropping the volunteers food, lunches, pizzas, snacks, even handing out Hydrolite ice blocks just to keep everybody standing. Where did these people come from? The community. And their spirit showed up in mammoth amounts, more than I could have ever imagined. Whilst we had an amazing presence at the warehouse, we had so much then that needed to be distributed. So we had everyday people show up, stand in long lines, write down their car make and model, and then how far they were willing to drive. The team would then load their cars, we would send them to a destination, either an evacuation centre, a community hub, to wherever the jet ski and boat crew were, or to the Lismore helicopter hangars. A lot of these people came back and did multiple trips for multiple days. The boat and jet ski crew moved further south to the Richmond River system, where more days were spent getting to towns like Woodburn and Coraki. In fact, these guys were some of the first people to get there. And like a scene out of a movie, locals were running down to the river water to greet them, try to hug them. They were just so thankful that someone had actually arrived with food and supplies. We were told with the food we supplied that an elderly man sat there crying whilst eating a bread roll. So thankful to just have food. Now these guys on jet skis, they risked their own personal safety. They were told not to go in the river. There were snakes swimming, hundreds of spiders everywhere. There were deceased cows floating and stuck in trees, sewage and agricultural waste contamination, and their jet ski intakes were easily filled with debris. Something that my husband Ben shared with me were the emotions and fear that he felt while doing a welfare check on an elderly couple, still to this day affect him. The floodwater was up to their balcony height on a 2-storey building. The boys climbed off the jet ski and over the handrail. There was an eerie silence and then a small dog barking. Knocking on the door and trying to get inside, not knowing what they would find. At the end of each day, we just hoped that everyone was safe. We would just wait for the call at the warehouse letting us know that all our crew had returned safely before dark. Logistically, we took phone calls. We put our own personal phone numbers online and we received distress calls 24/7. We barely slept. Calls and texts continued throughout the night. We had to learn on the fly and figure out who they were, where they were, because a lot of these towns we'd never even heard of before, and then how to help them. A lot of hubs and evacuation centres called us and would request specific items that they needed. A couple of huge hubs were created purely from this community's donations alone. Our drivers filled their makeshift hubs with supplies so they could support their own fellow community members. We received a phone call from a little boy in Gunalabar, near Lismore. He needed a $10,000 diabetic insulin pump. He had been waiting on for 4 days. We were able to get the donated pump to him within 2 hours of receiving that phone call. Now, a lot of this connection was pulled together by finding people or them finding us and then connecting them together. We had electrician group chats, we had kitchen group chats, boat and jet ski group chats, a nurse group chat, and a helicopter group chat. We had location drop zones and requests for help. We gave specific destinations, but mostly we just connected everyone together so they could keep working as a team. Now, who made this happen? Regular people. Now, before these floods happened, I would have assumed that government-employed services would swoop in on military vehicles. They would be abseiling and dropping down from the helicopters above. But the silence in those first days was deafening. We eventually, officially, handed our operation over to the government. We had the ADF, the SES, police and government disaster relief employees all come to see what we had done and ask questions on how. They came at the end of a 6-day marathon. Community members willingly and selflessly took on integral roles to be able to provide immediate support to fellow human beings. What took place could not have happened without every single person self-sacrificing. The guys on jet skis wouldn't have had any supplies if it wasn't for the drivers that delivered them. And the drivers would have had nothing to deliver if the warehouse volunteers weren't packing them up. And the volunteers wouldn't have packed vehicles if the community didn't donate. And so it goes on, and it becomes a full circle of all the hands coming together. For me and many others, the memories of these times will stay with us forever. Experiencing a natural disaster like this truly affected us all. When I look back and reflect, I wonder just how did we manage to come together so quickly, to get systems in place so effectively? And I'm not sure that I have the answer. But what I do know is not to underestimate the community around you and what we are all capable of when we choose to come together. Thank you.